Okay, welcome to another edition of Carnivore Bites. I'm your host, Jeff Sherman, along with Dr. Eric Lopkin. A lot, a lot on the agenda, as always. I think Biden and Camilla is the gift that keeps on giving for podcasters like us. And we have an unfortunate incident, to say the least, with Russia. I'd like your comments. Let's have this an open slate with Dr. Lopkin. Some of your thoughts in terms of why this happened and its repercussions.
There's a lot of reasons why it happened, not the least of which is the fact that Putin is now 70. He long ago stated his desire to reunite the Soviet Union, and now realistically his time is running out. We don't know how much longer he's going to be able to hold on to power. So he wants to make a big splash with this. He wants to push the Soviet Union back together. And of course, Biden's foreign policy weakness just gave him the golden opportunity to do so.
It was a clean slate. There's there's going to be some bumps in the road for him, but it's pretty much, thank you very much, done.
For the most part, yes. And, during the 2020 campaign, Biden was yelling, "Oh, Putin doesn't want me to be president because, he'll stand up to Putin." It's like, no, Putin didn't do anything under the Trump administration. Under the Obama administration, with Biden as vice president, he invaded Crimea. So he knew that Biden was weak. And, let's be very clear about this. The entire world knew that Biden was weak on foreign policy. We had Al Qaeda members at Guantanamo who, during interrogation, admitted that they were considering assassinating Barack Obama just because they knew Biden couldn't handle the job.
That's, but you'll never hear that on MSNBC or CNN. But what you will hear, Dr. Lopkin and our listeners out there, is you'd have to be on some really good pot to come to grips with this one. MSNBC and CNN talking heads were blaming Trump. Really?
Well, because that's their agenda and they're sticking to it. Here's some facts. Russia's entire economy is based on oil and gas. They've actually been referred to as a gas station with an army. Under Trump, not only did America have energy independence, so we had no need for their oil and gas, we were supplying Europe. So they had less need for Russia's oil and gas. Biden comes in, kills America's energy independence, gives the go-ahead for the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, gets Europe more dependent on Russian oil and gas.
Plus some simple supply and demand. With
Yes,
us out of the picture being net importers now, his leverage went down the crapper, and he's so beholden to the Bernie Sanders AOC wing of his nutcase party that he's incapable of ramping up production or sending a signal through the world oil markets that he's prepared to do that. He's really a capon in chief.
That's the big problem. This entire thing that's going on with Ukraine could be handled very simply and without Americans putting any troops on the ground. And number one is you reverse every energy policy that Biden made when he came in.
Still doable, by the way.
Yeah. Yes. You ramp up production because, one, it makes us less reliant on Russia. It makes Europe less reliant on Russia. But it also lowers the price of oil, which means
supply and demand.
Right. So it means Russia will be making less money. So that's one. Two, massive.
But can I interject one thing? Just interject one thing real quick. Is when you've been in, I'll use the term public service on the dole, on the like Biden has, you don't understand supply and demand. Is that so far off from the truth?
No, it's not. Unfortunately, most politicians don't understand how economics work. But so, yeah, that's the first phase. Phase two, massive economic sanctions. Strangle their ability to access international banks. Go after the oligarchs that are supporting Putin. You crush their monetary supply and crush their oil and gas, they're not going to have enough money to pay their troops. Guess what? Russian troops are not invading Ukraine to protect the motherland and out of patriotism. No, these are soldiers who are being paid. You stop paying them, they will stop fighting. And phase three is start hiring hackers and build up our offensive capabilities in cyber warfare.
Everything you said is 100% correct. And what infuriates me and perplexes me is that we have someone who's well beyond, he never had an A game to begin with. Now he's got a Z minus game, not B minus, Z minus. His ability to think strategically and the doofuses he has surrounding him, that what you just outlined 100% makes strategic sense. Will it happen, Dr. Lopkin?
Probably not.
0 being 0 and 10 being a definite. What would you give it? I'd give it a 1.
I'd give it a 1. Yes. I don't think they'll go down that road. I mean, let's not forget. Robert Gates said, Biden's been on the wrong side of every foreign policy decision for 50 years. And of course, my favorite Biden quote from Barack Obama himself, never underestimate Biden's ability to F things up.
There's no question about it. Speaking of effing things up, we have Camilla, the esteemed vice president, on her tour, her reboot tour, if you want to call it that. And she basically had a very, 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 very big debacle once again, didn't she, Dr. Lopkin?
She does, I don't even know what to say about her anymore. She can't open her mouth without screwing things up. She was never prepared to be vice president. She was certainly never prepared to be president. Putting her
but
out.
If you listen to her speech, it was like the 1980s Valley Girl. It was like, guys, it was like a rambling, whatever, mishmash of nonsense. And even Kelsey Gabbard, who once a Democrat, I think she's leaving the reservation.
I actually believe she is going to switch parties because I know she is speaking at CPAP.
Exactly. Yes, that was my next point. But she called it a embarrassment, and I think she's 100% correct. And I'm also thinking, I'd love your insight on this one. I'm not so sure she's not the canary in the coal mine. Since the Democratic Party is now synonymous with insanity, if maybe 2 or 3 others are going to hit the road. Manchin, others, you never know.
It's very possible. We do have at last count, there were 30 Democratic Congresspeople who were not running for re-election. Some of them are seeking other offices. Some of them are just heading for the hills.
Actually, there's an article that came out that forget about it. Let's say everything was neutral in the election. Just their resignations are enough to give the Republicans the House.
Yeah,
There's nothing else done.
They're leaving in droves because the Democratic Party put all of its marbles in the hands of the woke radical squad. And now people are realizing America's not going to put up with it. In the 2021 elections, the country overwhelmingly voted against the liberal agenda. We spoke about this just last week or the week before. San Francisco recalled the woke school board members for being too liberal. If you're too liberal for San Francisco, you don't have a prayer in the rest of the country.
And there's a lot more to be said for that San Francisco recall. Just like the election in Virginia, it's got repercussions. I mean, like you said, this never happens. I think, is there as Reagan said, a morning in America? I mean, is there a sea change? I really believe what happened is people were sick of Trump, rightfully so. You know, the tweeting about the Denny's waitress, who knows what he was doing, just wanted normalcy. And what they got is socialism, and they're not digging it.
Yeah, the problem is when they looked at Trump, they looked at his personality. They didn't pay attention to any of his policies. And let's face it, MSNBC, CNN, they never talked about any of his policy successes. They just hammered home Orange Man bad. But you weren't electing somebody to come over for dinner and to be your best friend. You were supposed to elect somebody capable of leading the country. And Biden clearly is not that person. And part of the blame lies with the media for covering up the Hunter Biden laptop, for covering for all of Biden's flaws. But even more than that, I blame the powers that be at the Democratic Party, because if they hadn't kowtowed to the left, they might have had realistic, good candidates to run. The only one capable of running the country that actually had a shot at winning the election on the Democratic side was Tulsi Gabbard. And they threw her to the wolves. Hillary came out saying, oh, she's a Russian operative. It was absolutely ridiculous. And
I think even
the
Minnesota. I agree, but even, and I didn't love her, but even the senator from Minnesota, Klobuchar, she would have done it. I mean, at least she would.
Yes, Amy Klobuchar would have been much better than Biden or certainly any of the left-wing
well, the rest of them are freak shows. But it's really interesting. You talk about Biden's so far failed administration. Even early on, where usually there's a natural inclination to rally around the president. George W. Bush had like an 80% approval rating after 9/11. Biden, just the opposite. He's underwater and significantly underwater with Ukraine and Russia. And I don't think it's going to get any better, especially when gas gets to $6 or $7 a gallon.
No, that's certainly not going to make anything better. And his speech the other day talking about how the Ukraine situation is going to push gas prices up. Gas prices are going up because of his policies. This is just a convenient scapegoat. Will they affect gas prices? Absolutely. Do they have to affect gas prices? No, because if he reversed all of his decisions, prices would go down and what rose from Ukraine would be negligible.
But do you think he actually has the capability, which you already just talked about? I don't think he has the capability to, first of all, I don't think he's in charge, and I don't think he has the capability to adjust on the fly. I'm thinking about Bill Clinton. He was in Shitsville in terms of his first 2 years in office. He reversed himself and became extremely popular.
Right. But remember, Clinton was a centrist. So he had the ability to flip like that. Biden is right now beholden to the left wing of his party. And again, this is a failing of the Democratic Party, because the Democratic Party back in the 70s, after the disastrous candidates they had put in that were all very left-wing candidates, the Democrats put in the superdelegates so that if liberals pushed forward these horrible candidates, the superdelegates could smack them down and go, no, that candidate's never going to win a national election. We can't put them up. They put this safety valve in place. And yet every candidate that is up and is the reason that these are in place, they refuse to pull the plug.
I would agree with that. It's an interesting scenario. We'll see how this plays out. Speaking of the media, though, is they had Ted Turner